In this session, we'll discuss the setup of accounts payable accounting options. We can access this setup window by selecting Accounts Payable from the Setup Accounting Options menu, or by right-clicking on the Accounts Payable menu icon and selecting the Setup option. The Accounts Payable setup window contains two tabs. On the first tab, we can enter our default GL accounts and answer some miscellaneous setup questions. Here you can specify the general ledger account numbers, which will be used for accounts payable checking, discounts earned, and refunds payable. Any of these may be used during accounts payable postings, so the appropriate general ledger account numbers should be entered here. This section refers to changes made to records in the vendor file. The program has the ability to store a note detailing what changes were made to vendor records. Using this setting, indicate whether you wish the program to create these notes and whether you want the user to be given the option whether to create the note or not each time they make a change to a vendor record. Here, you can enter your company's federal tax ID number. The next checkbox indicates we want to post invoices as ready to pay. If this box is checked, every time an invoice is posted in the accounts payable system, it will be already selected for payment. The next time checks are generated, all open invoices will have checks printed for them. Most people will not put a check in this box because they would like to age their invoices. That is, they would like to post them into the system and leave them there until it is time to select them for payment. The next checkbox indicates whether the user would like to have the program check for duplicate invoice numbers during invoice entry. If this box is checked, then any time an invoice number is typed into an invoice number field in the invoice entry screen, the system will quickly check through the invoice file to see if that same invoice number has come from that vendor before. It will warn you if it finds a duplicate. The system now asks whether invoice line items should be posted in summary. Normally, the program will post one general ledger transaction for each line item entered on an accounts payable invoice. Now, if this box is checked, the program will summarize invoice line items which are charged to identical general ledger accounts into a common general ledger transaction. The next question is whether we should post our accounts payable invoices in the order they were entered into the computer or in vendor number order. The next checkbox indicates whether the user would like to have the program check for duplicate vendors during vendor entry. If this box is checked, then anytime a vendor name or address is entered while inserting a vendor, the system will check to see if that vendor name or address already exists in the vendor file and inform the user. This checkbox has to do with invoice entry. Normally, when invoices are entered and a vendor is selected, the system will display a minimal amount of information about that vendor. This information includes a vendor phone number, fax number, and a contact name. If this box is checked, the invoice entry screen will display the vendor address when the vendor is selected. These next two boxes refer to the completion of an invoice entry screen. The system can warn the operator if no invoice number has been entered and/or if the invoice has been marked as prepaid. When entering trade invoices, you can enter a description of the invoice and a description of each line item. Check this box if you want new line items to inherit the description from the invoice header. This checkbox refers to the Doing Business As setting available in vendor entry. If this box is checked, then during check printing, the system will check to see if the vendor has a DBA name in their vendor record. If they do, then this DBA name will be printed on the printed check. For example, we may have a vendor whose business name is Allstate Plumbing, but actually it is John Simpson, an independent contractor. If this box is not checked, checks to this vendor will be payable to Allstate Plumbing. Otherwise, checks will be payable to John Simpson, DBA, Allstate Plumbing. Next, the system asks for the minimum amount for 1099 forms. Each year, 1099 forms can be printed for selected vendors. If the vendor has been paid more than this minimum amount during the year, a 1099 form will be printed for that vendor. Here you can enter a maximum invoice amount. Anytime an invoice is entered with an amount higher than this number, the operator will be warned when the invoice entry window is saved. This can help keep extraordinarily high amounts from being accidentally entered. Finally, you can enter a default sales tax percent that will be applied to all newly entered trade invoices. The next tab contains information about accounts payable checks and default vendor due terms. Using this button, you can view more information about purchasing check stock that is compatible with this accounting program. Here, you can select the preferred check format for accounts payable checks. There are a number of check formats to choose from. Use the browser list to select the desired format. If you wish to customize your check format, select Form Maker. Then select a Form Maker check format using this lookup button. You can modify your check format using this button. However, we won't describe the process of designing Form Maker forms right now. That topic is covered in a separate training session. When you've finished customizing your check format, count how many detail line items are contained on your custom check stub, and enter that number here. If the check format selected is one of the laser printer formats, this Copies and Collation button will be enabled. If we click this button, we see that the program offers us the ability to print multiple copies of our accounts payable checks. Specify the number of copies to be printed, and then indicate whether those check copies should be collated. If we do not collate the copies, the system will print all of the checks in this order: the 1s first, the 2s second, and the 3s third. If we do select to collate, the system will print check numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then return and print check numbers 1, 2, and 3 again. Using this button, you can immediately print a dummy check for printer alignment purposes. This button allows for the creation of an account reconciliation text file. Some banks offer a service where they will accept a list of checks that you generate. As checks are deposited by your vendors and processed by the bank, they are compared against this list of checks for accuracy. If a check is processed for a different amount, or if a check not included in the list is processed, this will raise a red flag at the bank, indicating possible check fraud. The settings in this window allow you to design the attributes of this account reconciliation text file. It will be created each time checks are printed, so you can upload it to the bank. On the right, you can enter the default due terms and discount terms for entry of new vendors into the system. This means whenever we enter a brand new vendor into the system, these terms will be inserted into the vendor file by default. We have a description of the due terms, and we have a calculation which indicates whether the due date will be calculated based on a certain day of the month or a certain number of days from the invoice date. The same thing holds true with the discount terms for new vendors. Here we enter the discount terms and rates, and whenever we enter a new vendor, these will become the defaults. There may be times when you wish to change the due and discount settings for a group of vendors. Click this button, and you can force the defaults you've entered here to be copied to all your vendors, or just to a specific group of vendors. This concludes this training session on setting up accounts payable accounting options.